All right, picture this. It's a rainy, completely unremarkable night in 1971, but it's about to spiral into the catalyst for the single biggest manhunt in American history. We are talking about one of the most legendary true crime mysteries of the 20th century, hands down. A heist so audacious and a vanishing act so absolutely perfect that it continues to baffle federal investigators and, honestly, amateur sleuths everywhere, over 50 years later. So, welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to break down the case of a literal ghost, the man who leaped into the unknown and became an absolute myth. Okay, to really wrap our heads around how bizarre this case is, we kind of have to look at exactly how it started. On that rainy night, a man wearing a crisp, dark business suit just casually boards a commercial passenger plane. He wasn't acting nervous, he wasn't sweating or frantically looking over his shoulder. Actually, he just comfortably sat down, paid for a beer, and calmly lit a cigarette, which, yeah, you could totally do on planes back then. He looked like literally any other mid-century traveling businessman heading home for the holidays. But then, he hands a flight attendant a small folded note, a piece of paper that would instantly transform a completely routine flight into a high-stakes, life-or-death true crime story. Okay, let's dive into this. That single note eventually led to this man securing a massive ransom of $200,000 in cash. I mean, in 1971, that was an absolute fortune. And what did he do with it? Well, minutes after securing the bag, he straps on a parachute, forces open the rear door of the aircraft in mid-flight, and plunges into a pitch-black, freezing storm at 10,000 feet. He took the money, stepped out into the absolute void, and was never seen again. No way, right? To this very day, nobody even knows his real name. So let's look at the setup. November 24th, 1971. Airports were absolutely bustling with holiday travelers. It's the day before Thanksgiving, right? And this softly spoken man purchases a one-way ticket in Portland under the name Dan Cooper. The media would actually later mistakenly broadcast his name as D.B. Cooper, and, well, that name just kind of stuck. The details we have on his initial suspect profile are incredibly mundane, and honestly, that's what makes this so chilling. Witnesses described him wearing a dark suit with a black tie, carrying a briefcase, with a raincoat just neatly folded over his arm. He takes seat 18C. He even orders a bourbon and soda before the plane leaves the tarmac. He perfectly blended in. And this juxtaposition, a perfectly ordinary, polite gentleman against the extreme, heavily calculated crime he was about to commit, it's a classic element of some of the most baffling true crime profiles in history. So once the plane is airborne, Cooper flags down a young flight attendant named Florence Schaffner and passes her his note. Now, at first, Schaffner didn't even read it. She simply dropped it into her pocket, assuming it was just, a phone number from a lonely businessman, which was a fairly common occurrence at the time. But Cooper didn't let it slide. He leans over, entirely composed, and whispers a phrase that would change aviation history forever. "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." Schaffner immediately opens the note to find a list of precise demands. Cooper wants $200,000 in cash, he demands 4 parachutes, and he explicitly instructs that the plane must not land until his demands are met on the ground. Just like that, boom, a completely normal holiday commute violently shifts into a terrifying hostage situation. Which brings us to the negotiation, circling Seattle. So while the Boeing 727 begins circling Seattle and the FBI is just scrambling on the ground to gather the cash and parachutes, Cooper pops open his briefcase for the flight attendant just to prove he wasn't bluffing. Inside, she sees a terrifying, crude assembly. We're talking wires, a large battery, and several thick red sticks that closely resembled dynamite. Now, whether that bomb was actually functional or just a theatrical prop is something forensic experts would never be able to confirm. But airline executives, they weren't taking any chances. They chose to pay the ransom to guarantee the safety of the 36 passengers on board. Meanwhile, the unsub remains oddly polite. I mean, he even allowed the flight crew to order meals for the passengers while they were stuck circling up in the sky. Let's move to and see how this builds. As the evening unfolded, a tense timeline took shape. After boarding in Portland and circling Seattle for hours, the plane finally touches down to make the exchange. True to his word, Cooper allows all 36 passengers and 2 of the flight attendants to disembark safely in Seattle once the money and the 4 parachutes are brought on board. But the night was far from over, guys. With a skeleton crew remaining, Cooper orders the pilots back into the air, demanding they reroute the aircraft south, heading toward Mexico City. Now, what's really interesting about this is the incredible level of technical specificity in Cooper's next set of demands. He didn't just tell the pilots where to fly, he told them exactly how to fly the plane. He demands they maintain a very low altitude of 10,000 feet. He insists the landing gear remain deployed, and he orders the wing flaps to be lowered to exactly 15 degrees, which keeps the plane's speed remarkably slow. These highly unusual, highly specific technical instructions strongly suggest this wasn't just some amateur taking a wild guess. Cooper was a master planner. He completely understood the precise mechanical capabilities of the Boeing 727. And the reason he needed the plane flying low and slow becomes horrifyingly clear: the impossible jump at 10,000 feet. The plane is now flying through absolutely violent weather over the dense, freezing pine forests of southwestern Washington. The conditions outside were brutal. Heavy rain, freezing temperatures, and near zero visibility. Alone in the cabin, Cooper straps the ransom money to his body. He secures one of the parachutes. Then, he does something literally unprecedented. He manually forces open the rear door of the aircraft. Get this, the Boeing 727 was actually the only commercial jetliner in the world at the time equipped with a rear staircase that could be lowered mid-flight. So Cooper drops the stairs straight down into the howling wind and pitch-black freezing rain. He walks down the steps, steps off the edge, and vanishes into the night. Despite massive search parties scouring the Washington wilderness for months, absolutely nothing was found. No body, no parachute, no money. It was literally as if the earth had swallowed him whole. Fast forward 9 long years to 1980. A young boy is digging a fire pit with his family on the sandy banks of the Columbia River, and his shovel hits something strange. Buried right there in the sand was a rotting, degraded package of cash totaling $5,800. The bills were still bundled together with rubber bands, so the FBI rushes in, checks the serial numbers, and gets a perfect match. It was a portion of D.B. Cooper's ransom money. And this brilliantly illustrates just how baffling this mystery is. $200,000 was stolen on that plane. Yet, despite one of the most exhaustive, expensive, and expansive searches in FBI history, a mere $5,800 is the only physical forensic evidence of the money ever recovered. The sheer lack of trace elements left behind in a modern era is exactly what cemented D.B. Cooper's status as a total outlaw legend. So let's dig into the clues and theories. 50 years of dead ends. For over 50 years, the FBI shifted into high-gear detective mode, investigating hundreds of potential suspects. They compiled a massive dossier, chasing down known criminals, missing persons, and anyone matching that initial sketched profile. But every promising lead eventually turned into a frustrating dead end. The suspect profiles and theories, though, they are endless. The primary theory for many agents is that he simply didn't survive the jump. Plunging into the freezing Pacific Northwest wilderness in the dead of night, wearing a business suit and a trench coat, that likely killed him instantly upon impact or shortly after from exposure. But others heavily disagree. They point to his meticulous planning, arguing he had to be a former military paratrooper who knew exactly how to survive the drop. Or perhaps, given his intimate knowledge of the 727's capabilities and the flight path being directly over Boeing's aerospace testing grounds, maybe he was a disgruntled aviation employee seeking revenge. But despite all these theories and, the incredible advancements in forensics, plus thousands of civilian sleuths obsessing over the case, the trail went completely, irreversibly cold. The mystery quite literally outlived the original agents who worked it. Finally, in 2016, the FBI officially announced they were suspending the active investigation. They redirected resources to other cases, basically quietly closing the book on their end of the manhunt. So the crucial point is, it all comes down to the number one. Despite the golden age of airline hijackings in the 1960s and 70s, the case of D.B. Cooper remains the single only, unsolved skyjacking in the entire history of United States aviation. Every other perpetrator was caught, killed, or identified. Only Cooper slept through the cracks. And here is a thought that should send a total shiver down your spine. Because the vast majority of the cash was never recovered, it means that right now, as we're going through this explainer, over $194,000 in unmarked, decaying $20 bills is likely still out there. A literal fortune is sitting buried under decades of wet Washington pine needles, mud, and rain, just waiting to be found. It leaves us with the ultimate true crime question. Where is D.B. Cooper? Did his bones sink to the bottom of the Columbia River on that freezing Thanksgiving Eve? Or did he somehow hike out of those woods, change his name, and live out the rest of his days quietly watching the world hunt for a ghost? We may honestly never have the answer, but one thing is absolutely certain: whoever he really was, he got away with it.